After my manager stole my project and took the promotion I deserved, I stayed silent for 2 years, until I became his boss and fired him in front of everyone, the same way he humiliated me. But let me take you back to the beginning. The day everything changed. Back then, I was just a regular employee in the systems development department of a huge tech company, eager and believing hard work alone would get me ahead. I was working on an internal project that felt like my big break. An idea I developed myself, from the first line of code to the last line in the report. A system integrating AI to streamline workflows, saving time, money, and reducing employee stress. I worked on it secretly after hours, sometimes from home, sometimes in empty cafes at night. Every detail was tailored to the company's needs. I finished. The first person I thought of sharing it with was my manager. I went to him excitedly, showed him everything, and told him my goal wasn't just a reward. I wanted to make a real impact. He watched the presentation silently, then smiled and said, "Excellent work. Let me review it and present it to management, so your voice is heard properly." I trusted him, but what happened next taught me the meaning of naivety. A week later, management announced a surprise promotion for my manager. They said he had presented a brilliant development project that would be adopted as the company's official system. He received a huge bonus and was promoted to a higher executive role. I stared at the official email, each word like a knife cutting through me. I opened the presentation he'd submitted, and before I even saw it, I knew it was my project. And it was. The same design, the same workflow example, even the same mistake I'd forgotten in the data appendix. He took everything. I confronted him. I walked into his office, struggling to keep my composure, and asked, "How could you do this? This was my project." He replied like it was nothing. "I just gave your idea a real chance. Management wouldn't have listened to you, but my voice matters. That's your problem, not mine." I left feeling like my dignity had been buried. Not only was my project stolen, all my hard work, all my hope for recognition, evaporated. People started seeing him as an inspiring leader, praising his genius project that saved the department. And me? I remained an ordinary employee, working silently under his management, enduring his mocking comments. Once he said, "Some people are smart but lack vision." Another time, "Projects aren't enough. You need charisma to sell your ideas." He meant me. And I stayed silent. For 2 full years, I worked in silence. But silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's a plan. I decided I wouldn't retaliate with words. My response would be through work. I improved myself quietly, took courses, joined side projects, learned management from people outside the company. I helped colleagues, solved problems, became the go-to person in crises. And whenever my name appeared in successes, he tried to hide it. But what he didn't realize? Management was watching. Then, at the right moment, doors I never imagined opened. I was nominated to lead a major international project under the parent company, one that could elevate the entire company's reputation, and under my supervision, it succeeded beyond expectations. That's when the tone shifted. My manager stopped making comments. He started avoiding me. He sensed his position weakening, especially when management began asking me for details. They never asked him. Then, suddenly, the moment nobody expected arrived, except me, an urgent meeting with top management, attended by senior directors and the regional manager. A full restructuring was announced, including my appointment as general manager of the department he used to run. It was said in front of him, with me standing right beside him. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Later, I walked into my new office, his old one. I sat in the chair where he once schemed to steal others' hard work. But I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for justice. The next day, I called an emergency meeting with the entire team. I invited everyone, including him. He walked into the room, All eyes on him, nobody knowing what it was about. As he sat down, I began to speak. He walked into the room, confused but trying to keep his composure, or at least pretending to. He sat in the back, like just another employee. And I stood at the front, in the spot he used to occupy. The whole team was there, their expressions, a mix of confusion and anticipation. I'd deliberately kept the meeting's real purpose vague. My message had been short. Emergency meeting to discuss critical organizational matters. I began speaking calmly. Over the past period, our department has gone through many changes. Some were positive, others left their mark. But we've always pushed forward, focusing on the work. Now it's time to clean house, to reassess who's truly contributing and who's been exploiting. I paused, locking eyes with him. He was frozen. For the first time, I saw him speechless. No smug smirk, no sarcastic remark, not even the nerve to look away. I continued, holding a file filled with reports I'd gathered over the last few months. Performance reviews, employee complaints, notes from upper management, comparisons between tasks he'd supposedly completed himself, and those he'd delegated while taking credit. People who actually work, who carry this department on their backs, deserve respect. But when someone abuses their position, steals others' efforts, and hides their incompetence behind leadership, that can't go unanswered. Then I read aloud, clear and deliberate. Report number 12, Project X, attributed to the former manager but executed by Employee A and Employee B. Report number 17, tasks signed off under his name, while the real contributor was someone else. Report number 21, delayed strategic reports despite repeated warnings from management. Every point I listed was an arrow through the facade he'd built. I didn't need to say more. The team already knew. They'd seen it. They'd just been silent, like I once was. When I finished, I looked at everyone and asked, how many times have you worked in silence, knowing your effort would be credited to someone else? How many times have you felt defeated? How many times have you asked yourselves, why bother when someone else takes the glory? No one answered. But the silence in that room was louder than any words. That silence was confirmation. Then, for the first time, I addressed him directly. Once, I walked into your office and told you you'd stolen my project. You said life wasn't fair, that people like us needed to learn to stay in the shadows of the great ones. Today, I'm not here to repeat that injustice. I'm here to tell you we don't have to stay silent anymore. I didn't need to yell, humiliate him, or say, get out, in front of everyone. I'd prepared an ending for him, one that mirrored how he'd begun with me, but without lies, without theft. I held his gaze and said, this file will be formally submitted to HR. They'll contact you regarding next steps. As of now, your duties are suspended, pending a full administrative investigation. I didn't need to say, you're fired. He understood. And despite everything, despite waiting 2 years for this moment, I didn't feel gloating satisfaction. Just one thing. Finally standing where I truly belonged, not in someone's shadow, not by stepping on others' work. I'd gotten here through my own effort, my own pain, my own patience. After the meeting, everyone left in silence. No one spoke, but their glances said enough. We saw, we understand. We're with you. I returned to my office, closed the door, and sat down. A strange feeling settled over me. Relief? Yes. But also emptiness. As if the revenge I'd dreamed of every day, now that it had come, didn't taste the way I'd imagined. What I didn't know then was that what happened in that room was just the beginning of something bigger, something I never saw coming. After what happened in the meeting, after everyone left in silence and I sat alone in my office, I never expected to feel this. I thought a moment like this would be pure victory, that I'd celebrate, laugh, finally breathe. maybe even tear up from relief. But what I felt was something else entirely. The calm after the storm wasn't comforting. It was heavy, like I'd signed a death warrant, not just an administrative decision. Even though everything was official, the file forwarded to HR, the investigation launched. I couldn't even enjoy half an hour of peace. Questions piled up in my head. Was I too harsh? Did I take revenge, or did I just reclaim what was mine? And most of all, what now? In the days that followed, the office atmosphere shifted. There was a tension in the air, like everyone was waiting to see if I'd become another version of him, or if I was truly different. Some hesitated to approach me, others tried cautiously, and some still hadn't spoken a word, but the way they greeted me had changed. As for him, the former manager, he vanished, disappeared overnight as if erased from the company's existence. But his shadow lingered. In every corner, in every employee he'd wronged before me, in every vague decision he'd twisted for his benefit, in every document still, bearing his name, and people started asking themselves, was he acting alone? Or were others helping him? How did he stay in power for years without anyone stopping him? The truth? I started asking the same questions. When I revisited old files, I noticed a disturbing pattern. It wasn't just my project he'd stolen. There were others. Ideas pitched by junior employees, suddenly buried or ignored, only to resurface months later under someone else's name. This wasn't just one act of theft. It was a small network of favors, interests, cover-ups, and he wasn't the only player. I began connecting names, dates, meetings I'd been excluded from, emails that never reached me. With every file I opened, it felt like stepping back in time to years I'd spent blind to all of this. Back then, I was drowning in work, in passion, in the desire to prove myself, never realizing I was trapped in a game much bigger than me. But now, I was at the center. Not just as a manager, as someone responsible. And responsibility here didn't mean a bigger office or a fancier title. It meant a choice. Do I just keep the daily operations running, or do I open the black box and confront the whole truth? Then an internal email arrived from legal compliance, a formal summons. I was to testify in an internal investigation triggered by the file I'd submitted about my former manager. But the strange part? The investigation wasn't just about him anymore. It had expanded. Names from different departments, people I'd thought were ordinary, kind, hard-working, were now part of it. Turns out they'd been players all along. Names I never imagined started surfacing. A former finance manager, an operations assistant, someone from HR. Each had a small role, but together, they'd fostered a rotten system, invisible on the surface, but festering beneath. I remembered every time a colleague complained about unfairness, and I'd say, be patient. We've all been through it. Every time someone said, I pitched an idea, but they ignored me. Every time an employee suddenly left under vague circumstances. I hadn't participated in the injustice, but I hadn't seen it, or maybe I hadn't wanted to see it. Now it was all exposed, and I had no excuses left. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about saving an entire workplace from a machine that had been quietly devouring people's efforts. And in that moment, I understood. My 2 years of silence hadn't just been about waiting for my chance. It was a test. Would I answer injustice with more injustice, or would I become the start of real change? But what I didn't know then was that some people inside the company weren't happy with what was happening. People who saw me as a threat, people who'd benefited for years, and suddenly I'd flipped the table on them. Then, on an entirely ordinary day, as I returned to my desk after a meeting, found a small envelope, no name, no seal. I opened it, and what came next was worse than I'd ever imagined. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, carefully folded, no signature, no stamp. Just 4 words. Not everyone forgot. I froze where I stood, as if time had stopped. I didn't understand who sent it or why now. But something inside me whispered, "This is a threat. Not overt, but a reminder. We see you." Doubt crept in. I thought of all the silent faces I'd seen over the years, people who never spoke up when I was wronged or when he fell, people who smiled to my face but whispered behind my back. Was someone plotting to take me down, just like I'd done to him? Was there a bigger game? And had I stepped into it without realizing? I wasn't going to back down. Not after everything I'd fought for. Not after the struggle, the years, the heartbreak. That night, I went home with thoughts sharp as knives in my mind. I barely slept. Woke before dawn, sat on the balcony, coffee, untouched and cold in my hand. I retraced everything from the beginning. From the day I joined the company to this moment. There's something strange about reaching the top. The air gets thinner. The crowd gets smaller. The silence grows louder. But the most dangerous thing? You start seeing the real world behind the masks. The next day, I requested a private meeting with the CEO. I walked into his office and told him everything, not just about my former manager, but about the note, the suspicions, the files I'd uncovered. He didn't flinch. Instead, he asked me one question. "Are you ready to pay the price for exposing the whole truth?" I said, "If I don't, I become just like them. Maybe worse." And so, we launched a quiet, thorough internal investigation, documented, methodical, relentless. Every implicated person was questioned. Every old file was reviewed. Every name was uncovered. The results were staggering. Some people, completely above suspicion, were at the heart of the corruption. Others we'd assumed were silent bystanders. They were the real victims. Some were fired. Some resigned before the scandal reached them. And some simply broke. As for me, I emerged from that battle exhausted, but with a clear conscience. When I finally sat back in my office after it was all over, there was a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of shock or revenge or victory. It was the quiet of someone who'd finally learned you don't have to stay silent. Even if everyone around you does. Then one day, an email arrived from a new hire. He wrote, "I'd heard about you, but now I see it for myself. Thank you for opening the door to change, for making us believe that justice doesn't die as long as someone patient stands behind it." I closed the email and smiled, truly, for the first time. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally become the person I needed back then, when everyone left me alone. This isn't a revenge story. This is the story of someone who chose not to become a copy of the people who hurt him. The story of someone who chose to be the change. In a world full of disappointments and missed chances, there's always that inner voice whispering, "Stay quiet and wait." But the truth? Those who stay silent too long get left behind. Follow Mac's Fables because we don't just tell stories, we open eyes that were once closed.